Hey all, Ryan the Tone Geek here, and today I want to tell you a few different things between the Ceriatone Joyful Music and the original 2-Rock John Mayer signature. This is the Amplified Nation layout that they've generously provided the forums. I'll make a link in the description. The story goes that Amplified Nation had the original amp for some time on his bench, and he was able to reverse engineer and made this very generous layout. And over here is a Ceriatone, which released independent from the John Mayer layout, but all the components in layout is pretty much the same. So rest assured, the Ceriatone Joyful Music is very close to the John Mayer 2-Rock clone. There's a few subtle differences. My personal preference, if you were to have one amp, this is the amp to have. The 2-Rock is very dark. It really was designed with John Mayer in mind and to complement his Steel String Singer and his other bright amps, because this amp is very dark. It kind of struggles to achieve the top end tone. This amp has no problem at all. A lot of the flavor is still there. A lot of the punch is still there, so don't get me wrong. In essence, this is very close to basically a stripped down Steel String Singer versus this is just a very dark amp. Anyway, let's get into some differences. So in my opinion, the biggest difference tone-wise is there's basically a little tone stack mod here. You're going to see a jumper on the middle pot there, and on the real John Mayer, there is no jumper here, but you do notice on the bass there is a jumper. And this is actually pretty responsible for how dark the amp gets. You notice that there is no jumper here. And that's, I think, why Nick at Ceriatone opted to go with the jumper here just for better tone controls. But it also brightens the amp up pretty considerably. So that's a difference. And then we have the mid switch. The original 2-Rock has a 330 picofarad for the mid boost. And the Ceriatone has a really cool 3-way mid boost, how he designed it. We have the 330 on top and the 390 picofarad on the bottom. The 390 is actually the same one that's in the Steel String Singer, believe it or not. And the 330 is there, but at the top, actually the bottommost position of the 3-way switch, this capacitor and this capacitor is added together. So you're in like the 700 picofarad range, which scoops the mids out pretty considerably. If you wanted to get more of the 2-Rock, you could swap these, or if you're having this amp built for you, in the middle position is basically this capacitor, whatever's on the bottom, is in play. So if you made that the 330, that would match the John Mayer 330. So that's a difference there. Another difference, or it could be a difference depending, is here is the reverb. There's a capacitor on top. It's 1,000 picofarad here. And you notice that Ceriatone has a couple options. And if you bought a kit, he includes all 3 options, which is kind of neat. The original is the 0.1 microfarad capacitor. It does kind of darken the splash on the reverb, which is kind of welcomed. It depends on what kind of reverb pan. So why don't we talk about reverb pans? The original 2-Rock, and I have mine kind of sitting here. It's not, I don't believe it's a mod, but the model number is 9A3C1B, and you might see this as 3AB3C1B. Basically, this is a 3-spring long decay, and then these other numbers are for impedance matching. I bought, you might have saw some of my other videos, I bought a bunch of reverb pans to test between the two. The original John Mayer comes with this, from 2-Rock, that model number. Depending on what year you've bought your Ceriatone, you might have a different reverb pan, but they're $20. I mean, they're $25 to switch out. Very easy to switch out. Just RCA connections, and a couple screws holding it in, or if you have the kind of the sleeve that goes over it. It's very easy to swap out if you want to play. It's a very cheap way to experiment, which is kind of cool, and you don't have to open up the amp. Another change that I'm going to notice here is there's in the negative feedback, global negative feedback loop, we have on the Ceriatone a 10K 1 watt resistor, and over here off the 8 ohm tap, so here's the 4 ohm tap, here's the 8 ohm tap, it's going to the as a 12K global negative feedback resistor. Basically that resistor determines the amount of feedback or the gain reduction of the amp. This is a little bit of a lower value when you calculate out the differences. If you wanted the Ceriatone to match the John Mayer 2-Rock, you would put an 8.2K ohm resistor here, and it will brighten up the amp a little bit. Basically, the way that the Ceriatone Joyful Music is, the way if you were to buy this completely stock, it would be a little looser. I mean, we're splitting hairs here, but it will be a little looser, a little bit more gain out of the amp. Yeah, I mean, it's a great sounding amp, don't get me wrong. This is well-rounded. So again, this is my favorite for a well-rounded amp. This one is very dark again. So I believe that is all the differences, like the big differences. I mean, there are some value changes throughout the circuit here, but not enough to make a big difference. So again, to recap, we have the bright switch that's different between the two. The capacitor value, of course. The reverb capacitor, return capacitor. We have the tone stack change, so where the bass and the middle jumper here is swapped with a 2-Rock, so that really darkens the amp up. I would say that's an easy experiment too, so if you open up your amp, just be very careful, and then like literally you could just jump between here and cut the mid, and then you would have largely the 2-Rock tone. I mean, I would recommend changing out the global negative feedback, and if I do recommend a resistor, if you do that, Allen Bradley 60s 2-watt carbon composite new old stock would be the way to go, kind of keeping in the Dumble domain. But anyway, yeah, and if you really want to get crazy with it, I'm going to do a few videos. So here's my amp underneath of a few things that I did to toggle between all these changes. So you're going to notice here I have a global negative feedback 3-way switch, so it changes between 3 values. One is the Ceriatone, one is the John Mayer, and then the other is a steel string singer. Since my amp, I built this myself, it's a steel string singer number 4 clone. I have the mid boost way down here. I have the rock jazz switch, which originally does nothing. That's not in any of the circuit. We have the deep, and we have the bright, just like the John Mayer. I went ahead and made a switch here for the rock and jazz that basically you can kind of sort of see here. The jump between the bass knob is handled when in the up position, so in the rock position, it jumps that connection. And when I have it in the jazz position, it jumps the mids. So it turns basically largely the tone between the John Mayer 2-Rock and the Ceriatone tone stack. So it really brightens the amp up. So yeah, that's largely the differences and experimentation that I did. So let me know what you think, and let me know what you want to see in the future. Thanks.